What if, for example, you started going through puberty and you started growing breasts?
Yeah, that would suck.
Do you think that you should get treatment for that? Would this cause a certain level of gender dysphoria, you think? Like, specifically, you feel like that you are turning into something that you're not if you started growing breasts?
I wouldn't say that I'm turning into a girl. I would just say that I don't want boobs.
Yeah.
Not because I'm a man.
Really?
But because...
You don't feel like you're a man?
Them. No, I just don't think that has anything to do with that. Like, I think if I started...
So why don't you want to grow boobs?
Sounds pretty annoying.
I just want to get this clear, right? Like, your entire argument, you would not want to grow boobs, not because it is not congruent with your gender, but because it's annoying.
Trans women are women?
Yeah, based.
How did you come to that conclusion?
By gender.
Okay. What's the definition of a woman?
It can be adult human female, if you prefer.
Oh, of a female? Okay.
Sure. It can also be somebody whose gender identifies as that of women.
I don't think that we should let trans kids do that shit. That's fucked up.
Do what shit?
Like take things that change their body. It's fucked up.
When are trans kids taking things that change their body? When are trans kids taking things that affect their body?
When their doctors
or that change their body.
Yeah, HRT. Thank you.
Are you aware that children are not given HRT? Are you referring to hormone blockers or HRT?
Yeah, puberty blockers. That's what I'm thinking of.
Okay. So you think that children should never be taking hormone blockers then?
I know there's medical reasons for it.
So children can take hormone blockers if there's a medical reason for it?
I mean, I think intention is important in everything.
So if there's a medical reason, then they should take hormone blockers.
Yeah, but being trans isn't a thing that we understand yet at all.
We don't?
Probably won't. I mean, you can't objectively say whether a person believes or feels that they're the opposite gender or not.
That's
fair.
I
don't think that you can...
Do you think that they should like go see a therapist or something to like figure out if they really are like have gender dysphoria, for example?
Yeah, they should seek therapy until they're at an age where our society like...
Whoa, base, that's gender affirming care. You're just arguing.
Yeah, but I'm saying until they have a like where our society decides that like you can make decisions on your own. Until you reach that point, then it should just be conversations and therapy.
Well, but that would be gender affirming care, what you're arguing.
That's fine. Yeah.
You also argued if they have a medical necessity, then it would be fine. And so if they have gender dysphoria, then hormone blockers are perfectly appropriate for children because it's a medical necessity.
Yeah, but that's opinion. Like that's dependent
on
it
would be up to a psychologist and a doctor, as well as the parent, to be able to make that determination.
Yeah, but those people aren't God. Like they don't know. Like they don't. They're
not. But I would probably trust an endocrinologist to, I don't know, some random guy on the internet, right?
I mean, an appeal to authority in this situation is pretty weird.
Do you listen to doctors when it comes to your health?
When it's things that they understand, yeah.
So isn't that an appeal to authority? Why not listen to, like, I don't know, Joe, the plumber?
Yeah, but an appeal to authority is different when you're just using it baselessly.
So you're saying that there's a non-fallacious appeal to authority?
I think that, like, if a doctor knows how to treat your cancer or whatever illness you have.
Okay, so it's a non-fallacious appeal to authority. Okay, so doctors understand what it means to have gender dysphoria, and they apply hormone blockers so that way they can come to a conclusion at the time that they are 18, staving off puberty, to decide if they want to actually transition as an adult.
Yeah, I just but there's long-term consequences to it. Like it's
Sure. Doesn't that sound like a
So-
discussion between the doctor, the parent, and the person who's going to take it? As opposed
yeah, but
to,
when it's down to
and
all
also
of
just
this,
so you know that the long-term consequences, that's it's kind of the point.
yeah,
Like if somebody
understand
wanted to be
that.
feminized, right? That they basically have long-term consequences of lack of testosterone.
I just think that this is down to like you can call it a medical necessity, but I think it's like if we're being honest, it's down to like the parents and the doctors. Once they decide yes, then it's the child's choice because if the child was saying no, then it wouldn't happen.
So then
So-
you agree with the medical basis then?
No, I'm saying once the medical basis is checked off the list and the parent's opinion is checked off the list, then you have to have the consent of the person
Yeah.
that's underage.
Yeah.
And that is where that person is making a lifelong decision
Yeah.
that they shouldn't be.
Yeah. I mean, it should be up to the. Yeah. But hold on. First
Yeah,
of
but
all,
it's
you
not up
made
to
that
the doctor.
decision on the basis of the medical doctor.
Yeah, but it's not up to the doctor because once the
No,
doctor
no, it's up to the
list,
parent, the
parent-
doctor, and the child. They all have to agree in order to proceed with this. That's the
Yeah,
current
exactly.
medical
But if we take the
distinction.
doctor and the parent out of the equation, then it's down to the child's choice. And that's
I'm not
unacceptable.
taking the doctor or the parent out of the equation.
Yeah, but once they're checked off the list, once they already agree and sign off on it, then it's up to the child.
Yeah.
And that's unacceptable.
Why?
Because they shouldn't be able to make why can't they drink alcohol? Why can't they
So
smoke
we
crack?
should like force them to hormone blockers?
No, we should have conversations with them until they're at an age where society thinks that they can make decisions. And
So
then
if
let
they
them
have
make their
gender
decisions.
dysphoria, they should be taking hormone blockers.
No,
Why?
because you shouldn't be affecting your body. You should be having conversations.
Well, we kind of already do that, right? You already agreed that hormone blockers are done on minors already, and you said it's only applicable if it's medically necessary. And I gave you an instance of it being medically necessary. They have gender dysphoria.
Yeah, but that's not a medical necessity. That's mental
No, that-
illness.
Well, that would be a medical distinction. Don't you think
Yeah, but
gender
it's not
dysphoria is a
curing
medical
the-
distinction?
That's like someone saying they have cancer, and then you're like, okay, drink rubbing alcohol. Oh wait, it didn't cure your cancer. It didn't solve the underlying issue.
What's the current treatment for gender dysphoria for children?
Probably a mix of hormone
It's
blockers
gender-affirming
and
care.
fucking therapy.
It's gender affirming care.
Yeah, and gender affirming care is therapy and hormone blockers, whatever the doctor thinks is gonna affirm their gender.
Yeah.
And that is not. I'm trying to think how to word this. Like, yeah, children just don't have they don't have the context in their life to understand the decision that they're making. That's why we don't let them do that.
Correct. That's why it's up to the parent and the doctor.
So do you think a 10-year-old should be allowed to drink alcohol if the parent thinks it's okay?
No.
So, what if a doctor said it was okay too?
No. Because it causes harm to the child.
Okay. What kind of harm?
They become an alcoholic.
Okay. So, how do you not understand the issue? What if the child identifies as an alcoholic?
But like the current treatment for gender dysphoria is gender affirming care, which can include hormone blockers if they have gender dysphoria as a minor, right? Because if they go through puberty, having gender dysphoria, this can be pretty significant, so much so that it leads to pretty heavy suicidal ideation. So they give hormone blockers in order to save the life of the child. Right? As opposed to
Ideation.
not giving them hormone blockers, which would increase their suicidal ideation, which can increase their overall mortality, which is against the Hippocratic Oath of medical doctors throughout the world.
I mean, I've had debates on the suicidal ideation thing before, and I think it's pretty pointless because, like, first of all, like, they're not actually killing themselves, and then everybody's like, oh, well, so that makes it okay. Kind of just like, I think that's a part of the argument that's just really, like, bad faith
So you just think
from
it's
the
bullshit?
left.
It's not a real thing?
Basically, because
Where are
I
you
think that's
getting
a
that?
culture.
Because I have numerous papers that show that it is in fact the case. And you're
Oh, no, I
telling me
know the
it's not the
stats.
case. Are you
I
studied
know
in
the stats say that.
endocrinology, or
No, I'm saying, like, I've
do you
looked
know
into those
anything about
stats.
sociology?
I don't know, probably not.
Okay, what about
But I'm saying
neurochemistry?
I looked into those
Hold on.
stats,
What about
and
neurochemistry? Do you know anything about neurochemistry?
I know we have dopamine and serotonin.
Okay.
I mean,
What about
these are very
neurobiology?
broad topics. You're just like giving me topics and
Hmm.
asking if I know things about them.
Well, yeah, because like it seems like that you seem to have an idea of what you want the medical establishment to do. And I guess like I'm curious, like how much of this have you actually read to like come to such a distinction?
I just think that based off of the logic we use in every other way, like if a kid was like, "Yo, I identify as an alcoholic,"
Do you
we
think
wouldn't
that we
just
should
give
use our
them.
intuition to determine medical diagnosis, or do you think that we should do like verifiable studies to determine whether or not what's medically efficacious?
Yeah, but if none of the current verifiable studies
That was a
are
question.
actually valid,
That wasn't a yes or no question.
well, all I'm saying is if we don't have actual proof that it's good, then we shouldn't
We
just
do.
be like, well, we don't know if it's bad.
We actually do.
So, uh, okay, what makes you think that it's acceptable, like directly?
Yeah, I mean, there's numerous studies that show gender affirming care is the medically established treatment, and also it's already very conservative in its position as to what is appropriate versus not.
Well, gender affirming care could just simply be like self-expression. Like like
Sure.
so to what point do you draw that line? What is gender affirming care that you think is too far? Is there any limit?
I mean, I would want to go with what is evidence based, like something that actually works, reduce gender dysphoria, and you provide treatment on the basis of the medical distinction.
So, do you think that like the number one um, question involved is what lowers suicidal ideation, and that's what the
Yeah,
best
I would
outcome
want to
is
save
for
the
you?
life of the child. Yeah, that's very important.
I'm saying, is it like the most important? Well, I'm saying also
Saving
like
the
we
life
all
of the
know
child.
that
Yeah,
like
I would say that's pretty important.
I mean we all know that the statistics show that it's suicidal ideation, not suicide. You know, it's not like they're actually killing themselves.
Well, no, they are because
Um,
they have a very high suicide rate, and it's often due to social ostracism. And if you have gender dysphoria, your body changing into something that you don't want it to be.
I mean, I haven't had a debate like this in a couple years, so maybe there's new shit. But I
Let me
remember,
ask you this, right? Let's say, for example, that you know, I'm assuming you're a guy, right?
yeah.
Okay, and since you're a guy, what if, for example, you started going through puberty and you started growing breasts?
Yeah, that would suck.
Do you think that you should get treatment for that?
Mm,
Let me ask you this: would this cause a certain level of gender dysphoria? You think, like specifically, you feel like that you are turning into something that you're not if you started growing breasts?
um, I wouldn't say that I'm turning into a girl. I would just say that I don't want boobs.
Yeah,
Not because I'm a man,
really?
but because
You don't feel
I
like
don't
you're a
want
man?
them. No, I just don't think that has anything to do with that. Like, I think if I started
So why
growing
don't you want
tits,
to
I would
grow
be like,
boobs?
oh, sounds pretty annoying.
I just want to get this clear, right? Like your entire argument is you would not want to grow boobs, not because that it is not congruent with your gender, but because it's annoying.
Um,
You wouldn't be at all embarrassed at the fact that you're hanging out with the guys and you got these great honkers.
yeah, that's what would annoy me.
Okay, so you would be embarrassed because it doesn't align with your gender.
All right, you got me.
All right. So gender affirming care would be good, right?
Well, this is
A
under
medical
the
necessity?
fucking. Mm, yeah, but I'm a man to begin with in this
Yeah.
hypothetical, right?
Uh-huh.
So I wouldn't be going against my gender to affirm the gender that I already am, right? So like why are we comparing that to a person that was born a certain gender and changed that
Are you aware that
for whatever
that there are people that don't align with their gender to their sex?
reason? Yeah.
Are you aware that there has been instances where they have observed the neuroanatomy of the transgender identity and have confirmed that the transgender brain is literally different from other brains?
In what way? Like a male brain will look female
Yeah.
if they're trans?
Transgender persons differed significantly from their cisgendered persons with respect to the subcortical brain volumes and surface area, but not their cortical thickness. You can contrast four groups: transgender male, transgender women, cis male, and cis women, observing a variety of patterns that not only depended on the direction of the gender identity towards male or towards female, but also the brain measure as well as the brain region examined. So trans
I
people can be
mean,
actually analyzed at a neurological level.
I mean, to me, like that just sounds like an argument for why it's objectively mental illness
Well, if
because the
it's
brain is
something that
literally
exists at their
different than it should be.
subcortical brain volumes, that would be an indication that it's not something they can help.
Yeah, so the answer is to affirm
Gender
something
affirming
that,
care, yeah, it's the only method that reduces suicidal ideation. That's correct.
but like what
And
you're
if you think
saying
that
is
your
that
suicidal ideation doesn't go up when all the guys are making fun of you because you grew boobs and they didn't.
I just feel like what you're saying is that their brains are objectively like either like stunted or malformed, and that means that um, the
They're not
treatment
stunted
would
or
be,
malformed, they're just different.
I mean,
Like they can
malformed
be
means,
perfectly functional human beings. They're just as smart as we are. They're not really any more dysfunctional than we are.
yeah, but it's like if some physical thing is going to cause that, I don't think that makes them thinking that true. Like,
Well, no, I mean, but you've already affirmed that if you grew breasts, you would want to remove that because it doesn't align with your gender identity. So the problem is that you can easily extrapolate that to a trans person who does not feel that way.
it's just hard because you're putting this under the context of a gender identity, and I'm thinking of it in the context of the gender that I am and the one that I was born as.
Yes, because you're cisgendered.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are guys that when they go through puberty, they grow breasts.
Hmm.
So what do we do with a situation like that? Do we just like ignore that and be like, no, this is how you were intended to grow?
Well, when a cisgender person aligns with their identity that they were born as, then um, that's something that we understand
Like
because
if, for
that's like
example,
quote
a trans
unquote normal.
person who happens to have different hormones than what they typically would have based on their sex.
I just don't understand how their brain being formed differently than ours is an argument for why we should allow children to do that to themselves.
Because it reduces suicidal ideation. It's the one way that we're aware of.
Suicidal ideation argument is just it's really hard because at the end of the day, like
No, it's
not
pretty
killing
important. I
themselves.
mean, I would imagine your suicidal ideation went up if
Yeah, but they're
you
not
grew
actually
breasts.
killing themselves. So I don't feel like
but
we
they-
can call
but they
this
are.
life-saving care.
They are.
But they're not.
What's the suicide rate for trans people?
I read into those stats, and I'm pretty sure the reason people don't
Do you think
give
that
them
it's the
credit
same?
is because the reason people don't give them credit is because they'll mark, like, if a person doesn't come back in and check in, they just mark them as they committed suicide. Unless there's
So
new
you're
stats.
saying because they're not checking in that they just mark them as they committed suicide?
I remember that being a thing.
I would love
unless
to
there's a
see that.
different stat.
I will share that to the entire audience if you can provide that. That would be incredible. I've never heard of a study like that.
No, like I said, I haven't had this type of debate in like a year, so maybe you have something that I don't. But I'm saying that's the reason that people use to discredit that argument that you're making.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to, like I said, I would love to see that information.
Okay.
So I'll go ahead and provide this. It says here on this page, hold on. Under the unique risk factors, it says, in addition to general risk factors, transgender people have additional risk factors such as experiences of discrimination, stigma, family rejection, and lack of access to gender-affirming healthcare. Findings regarding the unique factors include the following: experiencing discrimination or mistreatment in education, employment, housing, and healthcare, and places of public accommodations from law enforcement is associated with a higher prevalence of suicide thoughts and attempts. For example, the prevalence this past year's suicide attempts for those who reported that they have been denied equal treatment in the past year because they are transgender was more than double than that those who had not experienced such treatment, 13.4% compared to 6.3%. Those who reported that their spouses, their partners, or children rejected them because they are transgender reported a higher prevalence of a lifetime past year suicide attempts. Those who reported rejection by their family of origin, for example, reported twice the prevalence of the past year's suicide attempts compared to those who did not experience such rejections, 10.5% compared to 5.1%. Respondents who have been rejected by the religious communities or undergone conversion therapy were more likely to report suicidal thoughts and attempts. For instance, 13.1% of those who had experienced religious rejection in the past year have attempted suicide the past year. By contrast, 6.3% of respondents had experienced religious acceptance in the past year or attempted suicide the past year. I mean, I could keep going. I mean, these are all...
Yeah, it's just like all I'm hearing is attempted. I'm not hearing anything about committed. Right? Because that's not life-saving.
So, like,
if
it
they're
only
not- if
works...
Their life isn't going to be lost. Right?
So let me get this straight. You don't save a life unless it's lost?
Pretty sure that's how logic works.
I'm sorry, but you can only take. No, this is so dumb.
Hold on. I just want to be... No, wait, Daniel. So, if they're dead, then you lost that life, right?
Okay. But if none of them are killing themselves,
But they're
what is the issue?
attempting.
But they aren't.
But they are. I just read to you.
Yeah, they're attempting, but they're not.
So okay, let
Like,
me just get this clear, right? I want to get this clear.
I'm asking you a question. What's the definition of an attempt? Would love to know that.
I mean, I would just look at the Google definition. Let me...
No, I want to know the definition based on this study.
Make an effort or achieve to complete. Like, you're saying that they're attempted, but they're not. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, you're also
they
not saying
attempted to kill themselves,
you're saying that the
yeah.
criteria doesn't exist because they're not dead. But then if they were dead, then that would be 100% of trans people are dying.
Like with the male suicide rate, there's something to solve because we're committing suicide, right? not because we're attempting.
Let me help you out. So I'll go ahead and post this here. It says more than 40% of transgender adults have attempted suicide. 81% of the transgender adults in the U.S. have thought about suicide. 42% of the transgender adults have attempted it, and 56% have engaged in non-suicidal self-injury over their lifetimes.
Yeah, I've just never seen a study where like trans people have killed themselves. I've just never seen it. So I don't understand how you
I
can
just
call it
provided it to you.
life-saving. Yeah, but they're not like this is saying attempted, not that they
Yeah,
did.
you said that they weren't, but they are.
No, I didn't say they're
And
not
if they're
attempting. I'm
dead,
saying they're not
no.
I said they're attempting.
And if they're dead,
but they're not
then
actually
that
killing
basically
themselves.
removes, like, it basically just proves the problem.
No, it doesn't.
Well, yeah,
You
it
have to have
does.
evidence. You have to have evidence that they killed themselves to say they did it.
There's studies that are showing that they are doing so.
But it's saying they're attempting. It's not saying that they're killing themselves.
That's literally, what's the next step after
How is
attempt?
that the same thing? You were about to say that's the same thing. No, it's
What's
not.
the next step after they've attempted?
Yeah, killing themselves.
Yeah.
Which they are not doing. Which they
What
are not
is
doing.
happening?
How can you
This
equate
can't be your
attempting?
argument.
How can you equate attempting suicide to committing suicide? That is ridiculous.
I'm saying that you want to reduce suicidal ideation because that reduces suicide, right?
Yeah, but if there is no suicide to reduce, then what are we solving?
What if they're attempting suicide, then I'm sure there's numbers that have committed suicide.
Okay, I would love to see that numbers, but they aren't there.
They are.
There's no
What do
studies
you
on that.
mean?
There's a difference between attempt and committing. That's what I'm saying.
All right, hold on. This is ridiculous.
Do you think somebody can commit suicide without attempting suicide?
I think that that committing and attempting it leads to committing. Yeah. But
Yeah,
just because
exactly.
you attempted doesn't mean you committed.
No. So what you're saying is that 100% of the trans people that attempt to commit suicide just fail. Like 100%.
Oh no,
Right?
I'm just saying
that's your argument.
We don't have a number for how many are successful though. So why are we using that to justify quote unquote life-saving care for children? Because I don't give a fuck what an adult does. But
I don't think you have that for men, but you're very, very concerned about men. It's like it's literally the same thing. It's
Yeah,
like
but
I
we
don't know
have
exactly what
numbers-
you're trying to
we have numbers
look
that
for.
show we have numbers that show how many men attempt and how many men commit suicide. We have
Yeah,
numbers
and we
for how
have the
many
same
trans
for trans people.
Listen. No, we don't. We don't have numbers for how many commit
Yes, we
suicide.
do.
Okay,
Of
then
course
show
we
me
do.
that.
Give me a
Then show me
moment.
that.
I'll get you that.
Okay.
Yeah, he's gonna get you that right now. But again, it's like if you're saying that there's like a higher suicidal ideation within the trans people, let's say, community, than like the general population, but somehow they're actually not achieving to be successful when attempting to commit suicide than the general population. Somehow they're like just really, really fucking bad at getting it through, like way worse than the general population. Which seems like a very weird
I think
point.
I see what you're trying to argue here. There's challenges in determining the exact numbers of exact death records because it doesn't include information about a person's gender identity. Without that data, it's impossible to quantify the exact amount of transgender suicide deaths specifically. However, what we can analyze is the fact that is the fact of 40% of transgender respondents report attempting suicide at some point in their lives, which is compared to 4.6% in the general U.S. population. So it'd be safe to say that there's a higher level of suicide among trans people than there is the general population.
I mean, it would be safe to say, but not safe enough to the point where you let children make life-altering decisions.
Again,
based off
that ought to be a discussion between the doctor and the parent, which you've already agreed to.
Yeah, but it's under the context that it's life-saving care, which it's not.
But it is.
but it's not.
We just concluded that it is.
No, we just concluded that
Does
we
it
only
reduce
have
suicidal
number of
ideation or
attempts.
does it not?
We just concluded that
Does
we
it
do not
or
have
does it
numbers
not
on how many
reduce
people
suicidal
committed
ideation?
suicide. We just concluded that we do not have numbers of people who have fully committed suicide.
That is correct,
to
because it's
completion.
difficult to get those numbers. But if you can observe, right, isn't it safe to say that transgender responses reporting attempted suicide at some point in their lives is 40%, and the adult population is 4.6%? It's higher for trans people, right?
I just feel like it would be very charitable.
Is suicide
for me to,
higher
like,
for
let
trans
you-
people? Yes or no?
I think the reasons for that are very
I'm
completely
asking,
unknown.
use your brain, right?
Mhm.
Let's say, let me try it this way. I have a group of people. Let's say I have one group of people where 3% attempt going into a race, and then another group of people where 40% attempt going into a race. What's the chances that the 40% ones win the race? It would be higher, right, than the 3%?
I see your point.
Okay, so trans people are committing suicide at a higher rate than non-trans people, right?
It's just, to me, I don't think that that's a problem with them not having access to like HRT and shit like
Well,
that.
you could stop
hormone
right there
blockers.
because that's
I
already
think
proven.
No, I think that that's like a issue of them not being accepted and shit.
That is
Like,
also a factor, yes. But so is
Yeah.
non-access to HRT. I mean, you yourself already exhibited an example of gender dysphoria that certainly would increase suicidal ideation if you started growing boobs.
Yeah, I'll agree.
So
with
then
that.
you're able to acknowledge the necessity of trans people having access to medical care.
No, because we understand that dudes want to be dudes. We don't understand why dudes want to be girls.
Again, it's a matter of a person's gender identity.
Yeah, which they choose.
Yeah. Kind of
Yeah,
like you
which,
chose to be a boy.
Yeah. And then,
Yeah.
so what if I wanted to choose when I was like 10 years old? Like,
Wait,
I
did you choose
identify
to be a
someone-
boy?
Yeah, what
Did
if
you
I
choose to be a boy?
identify-
He said
No, but
yes.
did you
yeah.
choose to be a boy?
He said yes.
Yeah.
to
He chose to be a boy? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know how did happen.
Well, I just figured it was more fun. But yeah, I just think there's no evidence showing, like, because with the okay, let's say like the number
Well,
of
there is
men in
evidence. I
society-
showed you the neurobiological basis. I mean, there's numerous papers that are just like that.
Yeah, I agree.
And
that
mind
there are
you,
numerous
like
papers
there's
just
also
like that.
papers regarding the endocrinological basis. There's the biological basis. There is the endocrinological basis, as well as the psychological basis and the sociological basis. All of these independently came to the same exact conclusion.
I just feel like when it comes to like male suicide rates, say like you said it was like 3% attempt, right?
It's for the general U.S. population is 4.6%.
Yeah, okay, so 4.6%.
By the way, that's a crazy high number. Can we just?
Yeah, that's like ridiculously
It's like a
insane.
really
Holy shit.
awful number.
That's fucking crazy. We're cooked out here. Can't blame them though. But
Okay, so what I found is that 10% of males in the U.S. actually had thoughts of suicide.
That's sad.
Whereas when it comes to transgender people, it's around 40%. So it's like four times higher. So, but you seem
Okay.
to be overly concerned about male suicide, not trans people
Okay,
suicide.
so what I'm saying, my point was that, okay, say it's 10% for males and it's 40% for the trans community. If it was that many actually, if it was correlated the way it was for men, then why is there not just like an epidemic of suicide in the trans community?
There is.
No, there's not, because
No,
we would have
there
numbers
is.
on it. Okay, then where?
But it's all over.
Like, show
It's a very common thing in the trans community. Yes.
I'm saying show me like numbers though, where they like. Where
I did.
No, you showed me attempts. You didn't show me completion.
I've already explained to you why we can't give you those numbers. It doesn't show
Yeah,
that
exactly.
in obituary
So
reports.
if you-
It's not
if
exactly
you
easy to
cannot
get that
prove
kind
to
of data.
me- If you cannot prove to me that, then why is
But
that
you've already come to the
justification?
conclusion that it's logical to say that if there's higher suicidal ideation, then certainly the suicides would be higher.
I just think that it's like a culture thing. I think they all just like that's how it is.
Is the culture killing
Yeah.
those?
No,
And by
they
the way,
just,
in
like-
those
That's wild,
10%
bro.
of males, that thought about committing suicide, you also have to understand that's also including, right? Because it just says males, it doesn't say men, right? It includes all trans people, right? In those 10%, right? So it's actually like lower than 10% if you think about it.
Okay. I mean, I think that like the trans people is like a marginal number in that 4%, but you know.
Pretty marginal.
they
but
don't,
yeah, they matter just like everyone
they-
else, right?
Yeah,
Don't you think?
it's about people, you know? You should care about people. It doesn't matter
Yeah,
how
but
little
at
you
the
know,
end
their
of the day,
group is.
all I'm saying is you can't consider something life-saving care if the end result is not going to be the person dying. I don't think you can consider that life-saving care. That's not logical.
Hold on. We're talking about that it's reducing suicidal ideation.
Yeah, and I'm saying that
So
doesn't
like that,
fucking
and that's
matter.
by the
I'm
way, the
saying-
only known treatment is gender affirming care.
Yeah, I'm saying suicidal ideation is fucking stupid and pointless. I'm saying that all that matters is if these people are killing themselves, we
Wait,
solve that. If they
Then
are
why
not,
did you say
then we do it.
earlier that 4.2% is a crazy high number? Why would you say that if it doesn't matter?
Wait.
Well, it matters if it's about men, not trans people.
Ah, okay, got it.
Yeah, true. That's my point.
Okay.
No, I just think for men that we actually have numbers on how many are actually committing suicide, unless we don't. But I'm pretty sure we should.
How many people are committing? No, we do have numbers on that.
Yeah, for completion.
That's also a
not just
concern,
men.
right? We want to do what we can to reduce suicidal ideation for all groups.
No, I don't care about ideation at all, honestly.
Well, but then why did you say it was such a crazy number for the general population?
I mean, it's still like an interesting.
You sounded
statistic.
concerned.
Yeah, it's
But
an
you think
interesting.
ideation
So
doesn't matter?
So wait,
though?
you were saying it's concerning in one, and then in the other, it's not concerning at all. You just completely ignore it. Why?
Well, because with men, there's actual numbers of people who have committed suicide to completion, so that's where it becomes a concern.
But we've already acknowledged by having more suicidal ideation.
No, but you've already acknowledged that trans people, we don't have a way of actually getting numbers
That's
on how many
correct,
complete.
because you don't really
the
have a
event.
coroner report as to whether or not the
So
person
how
is
can
trans.
you say? How can you say that without evidence that these people's lives will be at risk? Genuinely, you can't say
Because
that.
there have been surveys that show that suicidal ideation is a lot higher than the normal population.
Again, what about completion? Ideation means nothing.
Why are you stuck on this? I keep pointing out the problem, and you're just going in circles now.
I mean, this honestly just feels bad faith.
I'm
How
pointing
many
out the
suicide
problem. It's not bad
completions-
faith. I'm pointing out the problem.
Look, but
No.
this would be a great
What do you
question.
mean
It's
to
like
completion?
if you
Because
bring
I'm saying that's not.
But
a
if you
problem.
bring-
It's
The
a life
goal,
that's
by
at
the way,
risk.
is to have them not commit suicide. So if we're sitting there collecting
only
numbers
time their
on
life is at
the ones
risk.
that actually committed suicide, we're not really doing any justice. We're actually just measuring what we've already lost. What a horrible stat.
I mean, I would love to get statistics on that so we can
Why
solve
not
these
just
But
issues.
Aidan,
work on
can I ask
reducing
you a
suicidal
question?
ideation?
if you would reduce the suicidal ideation to 0% among men, how many suicides do you think you would have? Completion of suicide, do you think you would have if you managed to reach 0% suicidal ideation among men?
Yeah, it would be 0.
It would be 0, right? So it would be safe to say that also for trans people, our goal should be to reach 0% suicidal ideation, correct?
To be fair, I don't even think it's possible to set it to 0. But
No, I'm just
lower,
saying, it's like,
lower
that would
is
be the
basically
goal.
The goal is
That would be
I
the
see
goal.
lower.
Yeah. the greater we get to 0, the better it is, right? So the greater we get to 0, the better it is. So like anything that would get us closer to 0 would actually be good, right?
My point is,
and if it works for men, it works for trans people too, right? I mean, you can't have double standards.
Wait, so is your point also that gender affirming care, as in hormone blockers, are they don't have negative side effects? You're saying that they don't, or they do?
Aspirin has side effects that are bad, so I don't know. Should they just ban aspirin because it has some bad side effects? There's no drug on this world that doesn't have side effects. That's a given.
But again, that's a discussion that ought happen between the person taking the drug, the parent, the and the doctor. Mm-hmm. Right? Not I don't believe it should be up to a politician or a Supreme Court rep, right? Because they're not doctors.
I mean, I feel like we're just getting away from my actual point, which is just that we cannot consider it life-saving care if the life is not at risk, and we cannot consider a life is at risk
if their suicidal ideation is higher.
Until we have statistics on how many people have committed suicide to completion,
that number doesn't matter.
Their life is at risk.
The suicidal ideation is higher.
All that matters. Completion is all that matters.
No, not at all.
Yes.
You've already agreed that we want to reduce suicidal ideation.
Oh yeah, we definitely want to reduce it, but not at the cost.
Okay, so it matters.
Destroying children's bodies.
This is wild, dude.
So, okay, say a person, let's say like a 10-year-old was like, okay, if you don't give me crack, I'm gonna fucking kill myself. Do you just give him crack?
I mean, crack will kill them anyway. So no, I would not give them crack.
That's even better. That's a better point. Yeah, okay. True.
But gender-affirming care doesn't kill people.
Say again?
Gender-affirming care doesn't kill people.
Okay, then let's do something else. Okay, let's just say crack, but it has all the negative side effects besides death. Like, it just ruins your life, basically.
Like, under this bizarre hypothetical and that they're suicidal, then yeah, it would be medically efficacious. We don't live in that world, so it's an absurd answer to an absurd question. But yeah, I mean, that would logically follow, sure.
So even if they're not actually killing themselves when you don't give them the crack, it's life-saving care to give them crack. Even if you you're
giving me an absurd hypothetical, and so you're going to get an absurd answer. Yes.
I just think that's a very radical opinion, and I don't think my hypothetical is absurd at all.
So let me ask you this:
it is.
If the only way that you could save your life was that you had to, the only way that you could save you and your mom's life is you had to have sex with your mother, would you do it?
I believe in God.
I'm asking you, like, would you do it?
No.
You wouldn't do it? So you don't care about your mother's life?
Damn it, bro. Just not.
That sounds a bit like suicide, if you have like an easy way out and you're not doing it. Just saying. But you believe in God, so
all right.
Yeah. That is a point.
God helps. I mean, God also made
trans people. I'm gonna give you the last word, and then we're gonna move on. It does look like we got some other people that do want to speak. So, but I'll give you the last word. Go ahead.
Yeah, until there's statistics showing how many trans people complete suicide, then I don't think we should destroy children's bodies and just let them do that under the guise of life-saving care. But all right, peace out, y'all.
All right.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Okay. Well, anyway, I wanted to continue with the trans debate, the very first thing that you have on this list. Mm-hmm. So what makes you say that?
Trans women are women?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, by gender they are women.
By gender. Mm-hmm. So how do you define gender?
I would say it's like a series of, it can be behavioral traits. It can be external phenotypes that are vindicative of female. It can also be social.
Identity, you said. Would you just shorten it to identity?
No, because
Identity of sex?
it's multiple things.
Okay, well, you consider it a subjective trait, something that you can change on will. It's an identity. Is that right?
I don't know if you can change it perfectly on will.
Well, if a man says that they're a woman,
It's a little more than just like I say it,
philosophy.
right? There's like you need to actually exhibit like the behaviors behind it.
Yeah, obviously, if you're faking it, then that's not really that's not the point. The idea is that it's an identity. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean it can involve an identity, sure, but like there's usually phenotypes that are associated with female. There's behaviors associated with female, and a lot of it can actually be stemming from actual biological constructs.
The current Oxford definition, which is most often cited, is the male sex or the female sex, especially when considered in reference to social or cultural difference rather than biological ones.
Sure.
One of a range of other identities that do not correspond with the established ideas male or female.
Okay.
So it's separating itself off from sex, the biological trait,
That's correct.
into an identity.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I disagree with that definition, and I
Why?
don't think that
You
it's.
think gender and sex aren't are the same thing?
Well, yes, I consider them synonymous.
Let me
as
ask
it
you
has
this
been
question. Can I say a manly woman? And that can you imagine something in your head to that?
A manly woman, of course.
Yeah. Can you imagine like a womanly man?
Yes.
How? Those are opposites to one another. I
Well,
thought
when
gender
you
and
say
sex.
manly,
Wait, I thought
that's a
gender and
very
sex are the same
specific
thing.
word.
If they're the same thing, then the concept of womanly man would be as if I said hot cold. So how does that
The-
work? How can you imagine that?
It's like if you said hotly cold. It's not saying hot cold. The adding of the "ly" separates it off into the.
How can I
traits
imagine
that exist
hotly
with those
cold?
things. Well, you can't, but that's not the same
Okay.
thing.
Okay. So if sex
Hotly
and gender
cold, I
are
can
not
imagine
different,
hotly cold.
right?
It's like when you dip
Me
your
saying
fingers
what is
into a
the
very
opposite
hot
of
tub.
what is the opposite of man?
Opposite of man is a female.
Woman, right?
Right.
What's the opposite of woman?
Man.
Okay, so when I say manly woman and womanly man, for some reason you can imagine it. How? Those are opposite to one another.
Well, because when you say a manly woman,
Yeah.
you separate off into
I'm
the traits
awakely asleep.
mostly exhibited. Yeah, you can't say that.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. But for some
Because
reason you can
awake
imagine in your
and
head
asleep
manly
are
woman or womanly man. What is
opposites.
that? What is that difference, I guess, like that we're exhibiting here? There appears to be something that doesn't really match with one's sex. How do we explain that?
Can you imagine a cat-like dog?
No?
A cat-like dog. No,
Really
I
weird,
can't.
no?
A dog that acts like a cat. Exhibits
sure.
the traits of a cat.
Sure.
And that's the
Guess I
same
could imagine
thing.
that.
Is that to say that there's a species identity?
Are
Objective
cats and dogs
identity.
opposites though?
Well, so I
No,
guess
they're
like
not
I
opposites.
get what you're saying. My concern is with your argument is you're applying a false dichotomy, right? You're looking at like the difference of taxonomic classifications as opposed to like what makes somebody a man versus a woman. But even if I were to play into your idea, I suppose like if a dog possessed all of the phenotypes of that of cat, as in it had all the phenotypes of Felidae, then yeah, we kind of would just think it's a cat.
Well, that's not what I said. I said a cat-like dog. And then I clarified that it's a dog that acts like a cat.
I'm playing into your false dichotomy, and it still doesn't work.
Well, the thing that you presented, a manly woman,
Yeah.
when you say manly,
Uh-huh.
you're separating off you're talking about the social aspects, the cultural aspects of being a man and a woman. That's right?
Yeah, and you're able to recognize it.
Yeah, and I don't think that necessitates separating off gender and sex. That's just the
No,
cultural...
but it does because you're acknowledging that these two opposites can be held together. And so if you observe this incongruence, then there's something that is separate from sex.
I don't quite understand. So you're saying that... So there's certain traits typically associated with men and women.
Yeah.
That's right. Cultural aspects of sex. And since those things exist, we have to have a word that we have to have a new word of gender called gender that allows
can apply
you to
the distinction. Yes.
Apply the distinction, and somehow that turns into men being able to freely identify as women and
By
that
gender.
being
Yeah.
rejected. Yeah, I don't see how that follows.
I mean, you acknowledge
there's
the womanly
not many-
man exists in your head.
Yes.
Can that exist in reality?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Wait a moment. You seem
That would be
So gender is
man
different from
that
sex.
here.
acts or looks like a woman.
So gender is different from sex.
Well, you're taking one thing into another thing. That's
I'll trust you
I don't
for
see
now.
how a manly
If
woman
gender
turns
is the
into
same
gender
as sex, the
separate.
concept of womanly man would be literal opposites of one another. It's as if I said hotly cold or awakenly asleep.
Again.
No, it's as
Right?
if you
It doesn't
said
make
a-
any
a
sense.
cat-like dog,
So if I,
which works,
but no, even
because
that
there's
doesn't
certain
work
traits
because number
associated
one,
with
it's a
them.
false dichotomy, and number two, it's also a problem regarding the what it is that we do to identify a dog versus a cat. There's a certain phenotypes that we observe, and if all of the external phenotypes are that of cat, but they're actually a dog, we literally would recognize it as a cat. That's
Well,
how
no,
it
I didn't
works.
say that. What I mean by cat-like dog, I mean a dog that acts like a cat. I didn't say that it has all of the phenotypes observed within a cat.
Okay. So I guess by this, the social standard, it would be a cat by social
No,
means.
dog.
What does that
It's a
matter?
dog.
It's
Look
still
at it,
it's still
it's a
it still is by its taxonomic order. And by the way, this is still a false dichotomy. I'm just playing with it just for fun. Here's the problem, right? We're talking about men and women in terms of gender, and if I say men can be women in terms of gender, that would actually follow because you can imagine the concept of manly woman or womanly man, and so this if I'm referring to a manly woman as bigender woman, then what's the problem?
You mentioned biological classification, taxonomy, right?
Yeah.
But it's no different here. But sex is a biological classification. So I don't see how it's a false dichotomy because we have one biological classification, species, and we have another one, sex. And you're separating out the cultural elements of that into a new word which lets you freely identify it.
No,
That doesn't exactly follow.
well, here's the thing, right? Like the concept of sex hasn't changed, right? Like the trans woman by sex is a man,
That's right.
okay, but by gender they are what?
Well, by your definition of gender, they're a woman.
But if you don't acknowledge the difference between sex and gender, then the concept of womanly man shouldn't even be in your head.
Do you know where the medical distinction and origin of the separation between gender and sex comes from?
Are you going to say
you can
John
tell me
Money?
that at some point. Oh yeah.
You realize that
Do you-
there's
do you
older
recognize it?
you realize that there are older scientists than John Money that observed this hormonal phenomenon, right?
What phenomenon?
It was in the 1930s. Do you want me to look it up for you? I forgot their name.
Well, I don't particularly care about what the studies, but John Money's study is the one that
Yeah,
kicked
it's
it off,
largely
one that was first
discredited by
medically
it's
recognized.
largely discredited by modern science, and you're also talking about John Money when there is older scientists that discovered it. The only thing regarding John Money actually just came from Matt Walsh, who just said that shit, and then people ran with it.
I don't know who John Money is. I don't know who Matt Walsh is.
All right, well, that's the guy who popularized that excuse.
When was this?
It was years ago.
Years? Okay.
Yes. Nobody mentioned it until Matt Walsh said it. And then everybody who is anti-trans started saying that this came from, I don't know, pedophile John Money.
Well, it did, because that was the study that was
didn't.
repeatedly cited before it was discredited.
Again,
That's the study that kicked all
again,
this off.
there's newer science. Like I was literally pointing out the neurobiological findings of trans people at a brain level, right? I can bring up the neurochemical findings. I can
Well, it's a
also bring
different
up
study, isn't
biology
it?
textbooks. I can bring up the psychology textbooks, and I can also bring up the sociology textbooks. All of these agree with me.
You're talking about a wide range of studies that all
That's
assume that gender is separate from sex.
Yes, that's because that's what was discovered.
It's not discovered. It's a
Yes, it
definition.
is. It's
Their
discovered.
words
We
are
realized
created by people.
that it is not always congruent. Like, how do you deal with, for example, somebody who has congenital adrenal hyperplasia? How can you possibly assume that it fits in this perfect binary?
I don't
Have
know
you
what
ever
that
met
jump
that there
over
are
is.
women that receive androgen insensitivity syndrome, and because that they have a lack of testosterone at their birth, having XY chromosomes literally grow up with a vagina, a uterus, and everything? How do you
You're
deal with
talking
that?
about intersex people now?
Yeah. I mean, well, but here's the thing, right? The intersex person is perfectly accounted for in my argument. Whereas the intersex person, it breaks the brain of people that assume that gender is the same as sex.
So let me recap. You believe that gender is separate from sex on an objective basis, that there's cultural elements that distinguish sex and from its biological traits.
I'm sorry, repeat that.
You believe that gender and sex are separate based on the fact that there's cultural aspects surrounding sex.
So they're largely congruent with one another, gender and sex, but there is a minority of people where the gender doesn't match the sex. But sex very commonly associates with gender. It causes the gender, right? Most people are
Right.
cisgendered.
Yes, that's correct. But what I don't understand is how you can take an objective stance on this when gender is a word and people define words. So you came at me with this idea that, like, a manly woman disproves my idea that gender and sex is separate. Gender and sex have been historically synonymous and still are for the vast majority of people, at least in America. Not vast, but majority of people, in their mind, gender and sex are identical. And by that standard, since words are defined by the people, I don't think it's
I'm not using
objective to say that gender is
words
separate
here.
from
I mean, I am using words to communicate with you, but I'm talking about gender being different from sex. You're already able to acknowledge, for some reason, a womanly man or manly woman. So, like, I have to ask you, like, what is that? What is that incongruence? What would we call that?
When you say, okay, let me answer your question first of all. I'm able to think of a womanly man because there's certain aspects of sex that are social, that are cultural. Right?
What is
and
that?
I'm able to take that. Well, that's the cultural aspects of sex.
And what?
Again, you're
that seems like a
shoehorning
lot
that
of
into
words
the
to
word
describe
gender.
one word. What is it?
Yeah. You're putting that definition. The definition.
Yeah,
of
that's what it is.
how is it what it is?
That's what
Who
we've
said that?
defined it as.
No, that's
That
what
cultural
you've defined
thing
it
that you're
as.
referring to.
Yeah,
that's gender.
Explicitly what you've defined it as, not me.
No, it's not
What authority
exclusively
do you
what
have
I
to
defined
define
it as. It's exclusively what the entire scientific community has defined it as.
So the scientific community gets to impose definitions of words? I don't think so.
Kinda, yeah. We do
No,
it all the
there-
time.
people-
We actually
people
will come
define
up with a Latin phrase to describe some sort of phenomenon that has been discovered that hasn't been discovered before. Yeah.
Kira, закрой рот. Sorry, my cat cut you off. No. Because, yes, of course, scientists
No.
get to invent new words. Yeah.
Just no.
Scientists get to invent... Okay, no, and then let me elaborate on that.
Okay.
Scientists, of course, get to invent new words because some things just we don't have in our dictionary. That you need to have new words to describe some new concepts. But what you're saying is that the scientific community, the scientific institutions, get to impose definitions on people from a seemingly objective standpoint, which makes no sense. This is literally a matter of opinion. And you're using
So, like,
the scientist's
when
opinion.
Einstein discovered the theory of relativity, did we have a word for the theory of relativity?
No, he made that.
Okay, so you just like came up with some word for the theory of relativity?
If the
What
existing
authority does he have
population-
coming up with a word, a phrase for the theory of relativity? It wasn't
he
called
doesn't
anything
have
before.
any
Now it's
authority.
called something. I don't
Get
it.
authority to do that, but scientists adopted it, and now in the scientific community, it's known
Okay,
as
so
the theory of
scientists are
relativity.
now adopting this gender being different from sex.
Okay, they can do that.
And you, by the
But
way,
it-
also acknowledge it. You just refuse to call it, like you're calling it the definition of what it is, but you're not using the word gender just to, I don't know, be obtuse. I don't know what
Yeah,
you're trying to do
yeah.
here. Like you're already acknowledging the difference between gender and sex. You're just
No,
refusing to call it
what you're
gender.
doing
Yet
is
you
you're
use the same
using-
definition as gender.
What you're doing is you're creating an analogy, right? That you know, it doesn't fit with the exact definition of sex, and you're shoehorning you're shoehorning the definition of the cultural aspects of sex into the word gender, and I disagree with that.
I'm saying that I'm using the number 2, and then what you're saying is no, I don't mean 2. What I mean is one apple and then another apple.
That's a ridiculous analogy. I don't
No,
even
it's
understand it.
it's a perfect analogy, because what you did was you defined gender for me, and I'm just using gender. We're using the same definition, but you're just sticking to the definition as opposed to just saying gender.
I define
Right? So when I
gender
say
as
2,
synonym of
right?
sex.
You're saying no, I don't mean 2. I mean two. I mean an apple and another apple, not 2.
Okay, you can think of it that way, but
That's what it
coming
appears to
back
be. I'm sorry.
Going back to your theory of relativity analogy, Einstein didn't actually have any authority to create that new word, but other scientists decided to adopt it, and then the general population decided to adopt it. That's how definitions work. Now, what happens here, the difference between that and this, is that there's an existing 2 terms, gender and sex, which have always been synonymous, and then scientific institutions decided to disagree with that definition. When the population already has those 2 words in mind, they have definitions for those 2 words.
Okay, I guess
can't
you
impose
got
that
me here,
definition.
right? It was introduced by Max Planck. But what authority does Max Planck have to say that?
He doesn't. People
Okay.
can choose to adopt definitions at free will, and I
Okay,
choose to
so we're
adopt
adopting
this
gender.
definition, and so does most of the other population.
So okay,
Who's
well, but
we?
again, most people didn't know the theory of relativity was a thing. That doesn't make the theory of relativity false, just because there's a lack of people that understand it.
You're ignoring that this has absolutely no objective basis, and the definition of the word.
But it
is a
does. I
matter of-
literally flashed a paper that shows the neurobiological findings of trans people and how they're different from cis people.
That doesn't change the definition of gender. People
Well, you're saying that there's no objective basis, but there is.
objective basis for the definition of gender. Nothing can have an
What?
objective.
This is like
definition
ultimate
that's social
sophistry.
thing.
What the objective basis of the definition? There's no objective definition
Yeah, of course not. And
for
you're
any
acting
for
like
any
there is.
definition.
And you're acting like there is. You're acting like this is an objective thing. You're acting like.
Well, I'm
saying that
pointing
trans
out that
women
we
are
need to
women is
describe a
something
thing that,
objective.
by the way, you have successfully described.
No, I have my own reservations of my own definitions.
Yeah, you use the definition of gender.
Yeah,
You
and
just
I don't
refuse to use
agree
the
with
word
using-
gender.
Okay, so because you've made an analogy where I said something that aligns with your definition of gender, you think that my definition of gender is that?
Yes.
No.
All right. So if I said, I'm going to ride this roller coaster, and then you said, I don't know what that is. That is a loopy mechanism of metal that you ride
loopy
on
mechanism
for
of
fun, for the adrenaline rush.
Well, if the issue
And
of
I said, and
definition
then
of
I looked at you.
roller
I
coaster
said,
was highly
"Yeah, why are you
politicized,
saying it like that? It's called a roller coaster." And then you're like, "That's not my definition."
Since you've insisted on this rhetoric that gender is like an objective thing and scientists get to define gender as whatever.
No, I didn't insist that.
So what are you? So what?
I
Are
mean,
you
there's cultural aspects to gender that are not objective. Whatever.
to sex?
There are certain aspects which certainly are objective, that can be associated with male or female. There are male or female specific behaviors that are typically associated with male or female. I mean, if you want to go over those, we can.
Not necessary.
Okay. So you're able to acknowledge the difference between sex and gender. I mean, you're already there. You just don't want to call it that.
No, you're imposing that on me with your own definition, which I disagree with.
No, you said the definition.
You seem human, and yet
That doesn't mean I define a certain word as that.
Yeah, you're describing what a roller coaster is, but not saying the word roller coaster.
we have
Yes.
the same
Yeah,
right.
because the definition of
But
a
it's the
roller
same
coaster
thing.
in
We're
this
describing
case
the same
is highly
thing.
politicized, and I disagree with your opinion of it.
But you're saying the same
But
thing.
let's look at this like from a higher level perspective. People have a certain definition of sex and gender, right? That tends to be synonymous with each other, right? And the scientific institutions decided to go in and for whatever reason, well, I know the reason, but for whatever reason they decided that these words are now separate. I don't think they get to do that.
But you've already acknowledged it.
You keep saying that, but I haven't.
Because you gave the definition of gender and how it is incongruent with sex, but you refuse to use the word gender. You're just using the definition of gender.
Okay. Well, let me give you an example that I think that you could that you could sympathize with. What if there was a mental disorder that made a person really uncomfortable with their race? Like, say it was a white person. I really don't like being white, so they take on racially affirming care and put on blackface. Is that something that you would be okay with? Would you call that person a real black person? Because I don't see a difference with this and gender.
If it was like a real thing,
If
are
it
you
was a real-
assuming it's a real thing?
in this hypothetical?
Sure. Yeah. Based.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's really stupid.
Why? You just gave a hypothetical where you introduce something absurd, right? Because like race is based off of your genetic ancestry,
Yeah. Just
right?
like
when we're
sex is
talking
based
about
on your
gender, which
biological
is can
constitution.
largely be social.
Well, race can
So it's
also
like
be
a it's
social oriented.
yeah, some aspects, sure, yeah,
Some.
yeah.
Okay. So what's the difference?
I've already
Well,
presented it to
there
you
is no difference. You
There is a
you would-
difference.
You would
because you're talking about gender.
Is that that's what you said, right? You would
Yeah.
agree. You would call that person a real.
Yeah,
black
under
person.
your absurd hypothetical, you get absurd answers. That's correct. That's how that works.
Well, I think that this whole gender theory is pretty absurd. So I don't see a difference here. I don't see how. This
What
is
about all
more
the
absurd
scientists?
than
Would you say that they're all absurd?
the scientists?
Yeah,
Well, science is
scientists.
just a reflection of the political environment. If you have a political activist group begging them to reclassify gender so they can be true,
I'm saying
women,
we're observing
then of course they're going to do
endocrinologists.
that.
Like hold on. We're observing endocrinologists that found these hormone differences. We're observing neurochemists that found that there's differences in the hormonal brain chemistry of trans people. We're also observing neuroscientists that are observing there are portions of the brain that are physically differently shaped. We're observing sociologists that are playing with the idea of the difference between sex and gender. We're observing biologists that are exhibiting the same thing. So all the just to be clear, right? All of these studies, right? They're influenced by a political agenda, and it's not just through one country, but through all countries.
All countries, you say?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about all countries.
Well, there's countries that do
I'm sure
study
Iran
this.
would have a different
They
opinion
absolutely
on
are observing these phenomenon.
Okay, well, so hear me out when I call this an appeal to authority, because you have a word that people define, right? We just had a very good discussion here with Daniel about words and definitions. We've came to the conclusion that words are deemed by society as what their definitions are deemed by society. So when you tell me, when you pull up all these scientists and studies, I don't think that has any meaning here, because this is a definition.
I mean, do
this
you
is
trust
word,
a
and people have
doctor in
agreed to
giving you a
define it.
diagnosis on a medical condition? Why are you appealing to authority? I don't understand.
Well, because they have experience in that. This isn't the
So
same.
would you say it's a
There's a difference
non-fallacious appeal
between-
to authority?
This term. Using science
fallacious
and
to appeal to
scientific
that
papers
authority?
is not an appeal to authority. Saying that
Well, it
they
is.
can define words because
You're
they're
appealing to their
scientists
authority.
isn't appeal to authority.
No, but
When
you
we say
are
appeal
appealing
to
to their
authority,
authority,
we're
are you
commonly
not?
referring to the fallacy. Okay, and that's what I'm referring to here.
But you're appealing. Okay, so when I reference doctors relevant in their field of study, it's silly to say, well, you're just appealing to authority, because
If there was
you
a
would do
group
the
of
same thing when it comes
scientists
to
that,
regarding to
came-
a medical diagnosis. Why? Because they're experts in that field. They know what they are doing, as opposed to somebody who doesn't.
If a group of scientists came together and said that the word banana is now a slur, would you agree with them? If they didn't present any
It sounds like a
evidence or arguments, just that they're
social
scientists?
question.
Well, this is a social question. It's a definition of words. So if they just said that the word banana is now a
Well,
slur, would you agree with
kinda,
them?
but also kinda not.
Kind of.
Yeah, there's
You would
parts
consider
that are
dropping the
entirely
word
social.
banana out
Like,
of your
take for example, like a
vocabulary.
woman drinking, like it's a womanly thing to drink a Cosmopolitan. That's entirely social. There's no biological component, but there are behavioral traits that are associated with that of women that are biologically based, but they're still social constructs.
I'm asking about the word banana. So what authority do these scientists have to declare the word banana as a slur?
I don't
If they
know.
don't
Maybe
present
there's like
any
a bunch of
evidence or
racists that start throwing
No, no, no.
bananas
No,
at their
well, no,
at their
not because of
at
any
like black
particular
people or
reason, not
whatever,
because of any
and then they get
particular
called banana
incidents or
eaters,
history.
and then it just gets shortened to banana. Sure, there you go.
No, I'm not talking about evidence. I'm not talking about historical events. Just the word, orange. The word orange, without any previous presumptions, no evidence, no reasons. They just declare the word orange a slur.
Okay, but this isn't a false dichotomy because we're referring to things that do have evidence.
No,
and
we're referring to
under your
definitions
hypothetical,
that
you've removed
scientists
the
came-
evidential claim. However, there are evidential claims regarding trans people.
I gave you an analogy of scientists redefining things, hoping
Uh-huh.
that you would make the connection there.
Yeah?
So I guess I'm gonna.
Yeah,
have to
and
be
you used a
bit more
false dichotomy to point out scientists that base a claim on no evidence, when gender and sex being different is based on evidence.
No, the redefinition of gender into something else has no evidence because it's a
Is there a
word.
typical hormone frequency that is associated with male or female?
You here.
That's right.
Is there?
A typical hormone frequency. Yes.
Uh-huh. Okay, so is it possible to have a hormone frequency that is atypical from your sex?
I'm Maria.
Also
Who are
possible.
you?
What do you call that?
I call that a physical disorder.
Not the talkative
Okay,
type I
and
see.
I mean, I would just call it a difference in gender.
Perhaps we'll meet
I just call it
What?
that would be an aspect of gender.
Farewell.
Isn't the reason that trans people take hormones is because they need to correct this imbalance?
That's correct.
Are you talking about trans people or intersex people?
That can be both.
Okay. I don't see the utility of the analogy you just made.
Well, if you're able to exhibit that there are hormones that are typical of that of male and typical of that of female, and you can see the exact opposite, that would be another indication of a difference between gender and sex at an endocrinological basis.
And again, you're imposing this in your evidence that gender is separate from sex.
I'm
I could
proposing
define
that gender is
gender
separate
as a
from sex
completely
based on
different thing.
evidence.
Well, that's a ridiculous
you're agreeing
statement to
to.
make because the definition of words cannot have evidence. It's a social thing. People decide what it means. Don't you understand?
Blue donkey
this?
monkey pig.
Yes. Blue donkey monkey pig. They all have definitions. that we
What is this
impose
argument?
on
Like
individual
it
science.
sounds like at this point, like you're just trying to be epistemologically like a sophist, and like we can't agree on anything or disagree on anything because we're using words that are ultimately subjective. What is this?
It sounds like you're trying to create objective backing for the definition of gender when no such thing can exist.
Well, it does. I just explained to you endocrinologically as well as neurochemically.
Can there be objective backings for definitions of words?
No, words are subjective.
Okay, exactly. So what makes you think that this is any different? How is this objective?
Yeah, this is just called epistemological sophistry. You're basically just hiding behind your words and saying because it's subjective, therefore it doesn't. We can't make any distinction on anything. We can't say the determination, the difference between cat and dog. We can't say these words. Me even talking to you right now, it should literally be gobbledygook to you because you can't make a distinction between the definition of words.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all.
Okay, so we probably have a series of definitions that we tend to agree with amongst one another. And in this situation, we're making a distinction between gender and sex, of which you yourself identified the difference between gender and sex, except you just didn't want to call it gender for whatever reason. It just sounds like you're being like intellectually obtuse here.
When you say trans women are women, you are assuming
referring to their gender.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I disagree with that definition.
But you don't, because you use the definition, not the term.
No,
you used not the word, but you use the definition that describes the word.
The debate should end there. I disagree.
Yes, the debate does end there. That's correct.
I have full authority to do that, and most of the population does too. So I think it's more objective to say that trans women are not women than the other way
And if
around.
a majority of the population agreed that sex is different from gender, would you just agree with me?
Well, yes, of course.
Okay.
I would
Based.
still have reservations.
I'll see you in 10 years.
10 years. Oh no, it's going to take quite a lot longer than that. Well, okay, you have to understand. You have to understand where this debate comes from. Why that there's like this resistance to trans ideology. Why people debate this at all?
Well, it's not an ideology. And I believe the reason why is because there's a series of people that don't like human rights, and there's things that make them uncomfortable. And when things make them uncomfortable, they want to remove human rights.
Okay, well that's a ridiculous way of thinking.
No, I legitimately believe that is what it is. It makes them uncomfortable. Their fifis get upsetty spaghetti, and they would just prefer that trans people didn't exist.
I think most people would prefer that trans people didn't exist because it's a social problem, and social problems aren't they're not great.
I've been making an argument recently where I said, the difference between Democrats and Republicans is that Democrats seem to want to argue for like human rights and human decency and having empathy towards people. And Republicans just they want to take all brown and trans people and put them in a blender.
That's an amazing head lore. But let me explain
to you
where
what's crazy is that you're basically going to that, right? You're like affirming the hyperbolic thing I'm saying.
No, when I said that most people would prefer that trans people don't exist, I didn't say that most people would prefer that they were genocided. I said I think most people would prefer that the issue of gender dysphoria didn't exist at all. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Sure, but in reality, there's people who have gender dysphoria. We've known that they've existed roughly even into the 1970s when we were exhibiting differences of hormones between each person. And so when we realized that there was, in fact, okay gender-affirming care, which also did include minors, it was only until recently that it came into vogue, and then all of the Republicans got uncomfy.
Would you please let me speak now?
Sure.
When you're taking the opinion of a lot of people and you're reducing it down to they just don't like human rights. That's not fair at all. Well, the real reason there's a resistance to trans ideology, and I am calling it an ideology because everything's an ideology, and that's not a bad thing. The reason that there's a resistance to this, the reason is because they look at people. They look at people, and 95% of the time, when you see a trans person, you think, "Oh, that person's pretty ugly." That's just the way it is.
Have you ever thought that there's ones that pass?
No, because
you've
those
never
are
thought of
one
that?
in a million TikTok Camaras. Yeah, yes, of course I've thought of that. But do you
So
think
hold
that
on,
the
I'm just curious, right? If they
majority of
pass,
people
then they wouldn't look trans to you, would they? They would just look like a regular person.
Survivorship bias on this?
Huh?
You're calling survivorship bias?
Oh
on
yeah,
this?
for sure, big time. Mm-hmm.
Do you think that most trans people pass?
I don't know. Hard to say.
How many trans people do you think pass? How
I don't
many
know. It's hard to
men
say.
with male builds do you think successfully pull
I don't know.
off
It's hard to
looking
say.
like a female?
I can't
I
say for
think
sure.
that it's less than 5%. Because that, like, I've spent a lot of time on Discord, okay? Okay, this is a horrible thing to say. Not that long. But, I spent a lot of time around online communities. And let's put it that way.
Okay.
The representative sample that I see just don't pass.
Okay. As opposed to the ones that do, that don't tell you they're trans.
Well, if you if you go through the
Again,
fucking
you don't
Reddit
know
for whatever
because they're
trans
hiding
people
it pretty
Reddit
well. And
If
I've
you go to
seen
the
plenty of
subreddit
trans
for whatever
people that
trans people go
absolutely
to-
pass, and they're like they look that, and it's like, what do I do in this situation? I'm like, well, I'm probably just gonna affirm their gender because they just look that way.
Well, if you go to the fucking whatever subreddit trans people go to, what I don't know. I think that there was one to like rate if they pass or not. If you look at the sample there, you would see people bragging about them passing. Is that right? You would see people like trying to put up
usually when
signs
they're
that,
passing,
hey, you can pass
they
too.
don't acknowledge that they're trans.
People that pass don't post on trans subreddits to encourage other trans people to pass.
Maybe some
That is
do,
it.
but many would not. Yeah, many would not reveal themselves as being trans. It's
That's
seen
what
as
the
a
whole
negative
point
thing
of
to be
those
trans,
subreddits
and so
are.
if you pass, it would behoove you to not even mention that.
On Reddit?
Yeah,
On fucking Reddit?
yeah, people get doxxed all the time.
No.
Okay,
Okay, well then the people that
you're
don't
just
pass
saying
would also
no.
feel an
Like
aversion
no.
to passing.
Okay, cool.
Well,
I'll just
you-
walk away now.
Look, you're saying you're saying that people who pass are less likely to post on Reddit that they pass. Why?
Because they pass.
Because they pass. Okay,
Yeah.
So they would.
They wouldn't want to reveal that they're trans.
This debate is ridiculous. It's trans.
Yeah, it
it's
is a ridiculous
transgender
debate. I
subreddits.
agree.
It's transgender.
Also,
subreddits, and
FYI,
the
we're
whole
using
point of them
Reddit
is
as a
to-
stat.
Okay, whatever. What are the fucking online communities we use? LGBT on 4chan?
No, use a study. Like,
A study of how many trans people pass. Pull it up.
yeah,
then.
I don't know if
I
there is
don't
a
think
study
they
for
do. But anyway, what I was getting to, you see trans people. Like whenever you see trans people, I think that that the most common reaction is, "Oh, that's a dude." Like that's just the most common reaction. Like whether you support them or not, you're going to see this. And a lot of people don't just refuse to delude themselves. They refuse to play in this game of delusion.
My
And
dude,
that's
you
where this
sat there
comes
and
from.
gave me the definition of gender, but refused to call it gender. I think you're in
going
the
back to a
delusional
different thing.
department, my dude. I'm going to be honest with you.
You're going back to a completely different thing. I'm trying to.
No,
calmly
no,
explain to you why
we're
there's
going
an
back to the
aversion trans
thing
ideology.
that I was trying to show you, that gender is different from sex. And if you can acknowledge gender is different from sex, then you would easily be aware that when I'm saying trans woman, I'm referring to trans women as in gender, not their sex. Their sex never changes.
I think I've made my point clearly enough.
Cool, man.
So, yeah.
I'll give you the last word. Go ahead.
I don't need a last word. I'm okay.
All right, dude. Good talk.
See you.